Right now you see people who lived roughly 1/500,000 days ago. They didn't have the modern luxuries we take for granted. They had no Wi-Fi, nobody was urgently calling them to warn that their chariot's extended warranty was about to expire, and they certainly weren't anxiously refreshing their social media feeds to see how many likes their latest selfie in front of the pyramids received. But as you watch them navigate these vibrant streets, haggling in the markets and walking in the shadows of monumental architecture, you realize something crucial. Their minds were exactly like ours. They were just as intelligent, just as complex, and just as capable of profound thought. And this realization forces us to ask a dangerous question. What if the timeline of human civilization we've all been taught in school is missing its most important chapters? Imagine standing at the edge of a forgotten world, not just looking at a few scattered ruins, but staring into the ghost of an entire global civilization that vanished so completely that modern science refuses to admit it ever existed. This isn't the plot of a science fiction movie. This is the cornerstone of Graham Hancock's life work, and whether you ultimately believe his theories or side with mainstream archaeologists, hearing him out will permanently alter the way you look at the distant past. Graham Hancock is a British author and former journalist who has spent the last few decades acting as a thorn in the side of orthodox archaeology. He wasn't always a renegade. He started his career writing about entirely observable, modern-day issues like international development. But in the 1990s, he pivoted to ancient mysteries, publishing bestsellers like Fingerprints of the Gods and later creating massive waves with his hit documentary series. His core argument is as poetic as it is controversial. Humanity is a species with amnesia. We have simply forgotten where we truly come from. To understand his theory, we have to travel back far beyond the pharaohs of Egypt or the first kings of Sumer. We have to rewind the clock roughly 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, right to the bitter end of the last ice age. The history books tell us that during this time humans were nothing more than primitive hunter-gatherers, shivering in caves and scraping by in small isolated bands. According to the mainstream narrative, complex society, writing, and monumental architecture didn't pop up until thousands of years later, after the ice melted and farming was invented. Hancock calls this narrative fundamentally flawed. During the peak of the Ice Age, the Earth was a radically different place. 2-mile-thick glaciers sat on top of what is now London, Chicago, and New York. Because so much of the planet's water was frozen in these massive ice sheets, global sea levels were about 400 feet lower than they are today. That exposed roughly 10 million square miles of coastal land that is currently underwater, an area the size of Europe and China combined. Hancock proposes a fascinating scenario. What if a highly advanced civilization thrived on those ancient coastlines? We're not talking about people flying around in modern airplanes or using smartphones. We're talking about a civilization advanced in different ways, master astronomers who precisely mapped the stars, brilliant architects and deep thinkers, who understood the hidden mechanics of consciousness in the Earth. So where is the evidence? Where are their ruined cities? If they were so great, why did they disappear? According to Hancock, the answer lies in a genuine, world-shattering cataclysm that occurred roughly 12,800 years ago, a geological period known as the Younger Dryas. Earth had been warming up, the ice was melting, and life was flourishing. Then, suddenly temperatures plummeted back into freezing conditions. While the cause is hotly debated, a growing body of scientific evidence suggests that fragments of a massive comet bombarded our planet. The impact would have been apocalyptic. Thousands of nuclear bombs worth of energy detonating. Unstoppable. Wildfires sweeping across continents. But the most devastating effect? The heat from these impacts would have rapidly melted those 2-mile-thick ice sheets. Imagine billions of gallons of meltwater violently breaking through ice dams, creating megafloods that scoured the Earth at hundreds of miles per hour. Sea levels didn't just rise slowly over generations. They surged. The coastal plains where Hancock believes this advanced civilization lived were swallowed by the ocean, taking almost all evidence of their existence down into the dark abyss. Only a handful of survivors, the lucky ones who managed to escape the rising waters, scattered across the globe. Seeking refuge among the surviving hunter-gatherer tribes, these refugees brought their profound knowledge with them. They became the gods and magicians mentioned in ancient myths across the world. They taught agriculture, astronomy, and stonemasonry, planting the seeds that would eventually blossom into the civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas. It is an incredibly romantic and compelling narrative, but mainstream archaeologists dismiss it as an elaborate fantasy, demanding hard physical proof rather than relying on anomalies and mythology. But what if there actually is physical proof? What if the evidence has been hiding in plain sight, carved into the very stones of our oldest monuments? If the survivors of this great Ice Age cataclysm truly scattered across the globe to restart society, where did they go? And more importantly, what did they leave behind for us to find? To answer that, we must leave the sunken coastlines and travel to a windswept, dusty ridge in southeastern Turkey. A site that has completely shattered the traditional timeline of human history, Gobekli Tepe. Discovered in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, Potbelly Hill sounds unassuming, but what lies beneath the earth is anything but. Imagine this. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 15 tons, arranged in enormous circular enclosures. These aren't just rough blocks of stone. They are elegantly carved with intricate 3D reliefs of scorpions, foxes, wild boars, and predatory birds. But it's not the art that makes Gobekli Tepe terrifying to Orthodox historians. It's the date. The site is roughly 11,600 years old. It was built at the exact end of the Younger Dryas period, the very same catastrophic window Hancock talks about. To put that into perspective, Gobekli Tepe is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and an astonishing 7,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. According to the standard textbooks, the people alive at this time were simple nomads, carrying spears and chasing wild game. They had no agriculture, no metal tools, no writing, and no permanent settlements. Yet somehow they organized a massive labor force to quarry, transport, and perfectly align megalithic stones. Mainstream archaeologists look at Gobekli Tepe and conclude that hunter-gatherers were simply much smarter and more organized than we originally gave them credit for. They believe that gathering to build this first temple might have actually inspired the invention of farming. But Hancock sees a different story. He sees a fingerprint. To him, Gobekli Tepe didn't slowly evolve. It appeared out of nowhere. It looks exactly like a sudden transfer of technology. What if it wasn't a miracle of hunter-gatherer engineering, but a desperate project led by the survivors of the lost Ice Age civilization, trying to pass down their architectural and astronomical secrets to the locals? Speaking of astronomical secrets, let's move to the very sands you might be exploring right now. The Giza Plateau in Egypt. For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid has stood as the ultimate testament to human ambition. Standard Egyptology states that these structures were built around 2500 BC as grand tombs for pharaohs like Khufu and Khafre. Hancock doesn't deny that the pharaohs used them. What he questions is whether the ancient Egyptians of that specific era actually possessed the profound mathematical and geographical knowledge hard-coded into the stones. Consider the sheer precision of the Great Pyramid. It sits on a 13-acre footprint, yet its base is level to within a fraction of an inch, and it is perfectly aligned to true north. If you take the perimeter of its base and divide it by twice its height, you get the mathematical constant pi, 3.4159. Furthermore, the pyramid appears to be a precise, scaled-down model of the Earth's northern hemisphere. If you multiply the pyramid's dimensions by 43,200, a specific number linked to the astronomical cycle known as the precession of the equinoxes, you get the exact polar radius and equatorial circumference of our planet. Are we supposed to believe this was just a lucky accident made by people stacking limestone blocks? Mainstream scholars argue these dimensions are either coincidental or the result of simple measuring wheels. But Hancock and his collaborators suggest this is a deliberate message. A message in a bottle cast across millennia, proving the builders possessed a deep, global understanding of the Earth and the cosmos. This brings us to one of the most polarizing theories in alternative archaeology, the Orion Correlation Theory. Developed by researcher Robert Bovell and heavily supported by Hancock, this theory suggests that the layout of the three main pyramids of Giza is not random. If you look at them from above, their distinct pattern perfectly mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt. But there is a catch. The alignment doesn't match the sky as it looked in 2500 BC when the pyramids were supposedly built. Due to the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, the stars shift over thousands of years. Using computer models, researchers wound the celestial clock backward. They found the perfect match, the moment when the pyramids aligned flawlessly with Orion, and the nearby Great Sphinx looked due east directly at the constellation of Leo. The date? Roughly 2500 BC. Exactly 12,500 years ago, right in the heart of the Ice Age Cataclysm, and if you look closely at the Sphinx itself, the plot thickens. Geologist Dr. Robert Schoch sparked massive controversy when he analyzed the deep, rolling erosion patterns on the walls surrounding the Sphinx. He concluded that this kind of heavy, vertical weathering couldn't be caused by wind and desert sand. It could only be caused by centuries of torrential, cascading rainfall. The problem? Egypt hasn't experienced that kind of heavy, continuous rainfall since the end of the last ice age. Orthodox historians and geologists fiercely reject this. They argue the star alignments are flawed because you have to flip the map upside down to make them fit, and they offer alternative geological explanations for the Sphinx's erosion. They demand hard evidence, potsherds, tools, buried cities, not mathematical puzzles and water stains. But for millions of people, the seeds of doubt have been planted. If these ancient structures truly encode the stars and weather of the ice age, what other forgotten knowledge is waiting to be uncovered? If stone monuments and eroded statues aren't enough to convince the skeptics, Hancock points to a completely different type of evidence: ink and parchment. Specifically, a collection of anomalous ancient maps that seem to show a world nobody at the time should have known about. Take the famous Piri Reis map, drafted by an Ottoman admiral in 1513. Drawn on gazelle skin, this map was compiled using older source documents, some of which reportedly belonged to Christopher Columbus. But the true mystery lies at the bottom of the parchment. It appears to depict the northern coast of Antarctica. Now pause and think about that. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820. Yet, here is a map from the 16th century showing its coastline. Even more baffling, it shows the subglacial coastline, the actual landmass beneath the ice, which modern scientists didn't map until the 1950s using seismic sonar. How is this possible? Hancock argues that Piri Reis, along with other cartographers of his era, were copying from fragmented source maps handed down over thousands of years, maps originally surveyed by the lost Ice Age civilization when parts of Antarctica were ice-free. Mainstream historians scoff at this. They argue the Antarctica on the map is just a distorted drawing of South America, or simply a fictional Terra Australis that Renaissance mapmakers guessed was there to balance out the continents. But the remnants of this lost world aren't just drawn on maps. They are woven into the very fabric of human storytelling. Almost every ancient culture on Earth shares a chillingly similar trauma, the myth of a great deluge. We know the biblical story of Noah, but that story was borrowed from the much older Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh. In ancient Greece, it was Deucalion who survived the wrath of the gods. In India, it was Manu. From the Maya in Central America to the Aboriginal tribes in Australia, there is a universal memory of a world-ending flood that wiped out humanity. Orthodox anthropologists tell us that this is just a coincidence. Rivers flood all the time, they say, and primitive people naturally exaggerated local disasters into global myths. But what if these stories are the surviving historical record of the Younger Dryas meltwater pulses? What if they are the whispered memories of the ocean swallowing 10 million square miles of land in a matter of years? And the stories don't stop at the flood. Across the globe, isolated cultures tell tales of civilizing heroes, strangers who arrived on boats after the Cataclysm. The Egyptians called him Osiris. The Mesoamericans called him Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. These figures always brought the same gifts: the rules of agriculture, the science of astronomy, and the art of architecture. Hancock asks a simple question. Are these just universal psychological archetypes? Or are they distorted historical accounts of Ice Age refugees, desperately trying to reboot civilization? So with all this compelling, mind-bending circumstantial evidence, why does the academic world hate Graham Hancock so much? Why did the Society for American Archaeology actively petition Netflix to reclassify his documentary as science fiction? 2. Be fair to the archaeologists. Their frustration is grounded in the scientific method. Archaeology is a brutal discipline of dirt, trash, and hard evidence. They argue that if a globally advanced civilization existed, we would have found their trash by now. Where are their tools? Where are their landfills, their specific pottery, or their metallurgy? Academics accuse Hancock of playing a god of the gaps game, finding mysteries in the timeline and automatically filling them with a lost civilization. They also argue that his theories unintentionally insult ancient people. By claiming that a mysterious, highly advanced group had to teach the Egyptians how to build pyramids or the Maya how to read the stars, critics say it strips these indigenous cultures of their own brilliance and ingenuity. The war between Graham Hancock and mainstream academia is unlikely to end anytime soon, but perhaps the real reason his theories have captured the imaginations of millions isn't just about winning an archaeological debate. It's about how we view ourselves. We live in an incredibly complex, interconnected, and fragile world. We assume that human progress is a straight line pointing upward. But Hancock's vision of the past reminds us that civilization is delicate. If a cosmic impact and rising oceans could entirely erase a highly advanced society 12,000 years ago, forcing humanity to start from scratch, what's stopping the clock from resetting on us? These ancient monuments, perfectly aligned with the stars, might not just be tombs or temples. They might be warnings left in stone. Whether you believe the official textbook history or you suspect that the timeline of humanity is missing its greatest chapter, one thing is certain. The past is far more mysterious, far older, and far more complex than we ever dared to imagine. What do you think? Are we a species suffering from collective amnesia, slowly uncovering the ghosts of an Ice Age empire? Or is this all just an elaborate fantasy built on coincidences? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through the forgotten chapters of human history while wandering these ancient streets, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Until next time, good night.